Welcome to JavaScript Programming Concept 4. In this video, we're going to explore how we can repeat a process using a specific programming concept called the for loop. In doing so, we're going to identify a process, and that process might require some accumulation. So before we go to an example, let's go ahead and actually review what the syntax of the for loop looks like. So unlike some previous programming concepts, the for loop is a little more complex because it requires three components. The first component is an area where you have to declare and initialize what's called the loop variable. Now this is something that you've done before. It's just a declaration of a variable. You could also think of this section as where we're going to start our loop. The middle section is a condition. Now we've seen similar concept with decision making, and that's exactly what the for loop does here. It does make a decision. It checks to see that the value of I is less than or equal to 100. If it is, then we will repeat the instructions that we have as part of our loop. Once the value of I doesn't satisfy this condition, then we will stop repeating. It's not an error. It just means that we're going to stop repeating the instructions. You could also think of this section as where we want to end. The last part of the for loop is a mathematical operations in this particular case, where we're changing the value of I in such a way so that we go from the first part to the middle part, and we could finally at some point end the loop. Again, so it's going to start at 0, it's going to go to 1, 2, all the way up until 100. We can think of this last section as how we get from the start point to the end point. Again, this will feel a little more comfortable when we actually go through example. So let's get to it. Now, in this first example, again, I'm using the same for loop. We're simply going to repeat this set of instruction, which is just a console log. So we're going to see hello pop onto the screen 101 times. Now you might say, well, why 101 times? I mean, it goes from 0 to 100. Wouldn't that be 100? Technically, if you include the 0 and you include the 100, that's actually 101 times. Again, I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you to count. So again, this is at a very fundamental level. This is how a for loop works. It repeats instructions. So it repeated the console log 101 times. Where it becomes more interesting is when we start playing around with the loop variable. All right, so in this example, again, it's the same example, almost the same example as the one from the slide, except that we reduced it to 10, so we can actually explore the numbers on the screen. So we can see here that the value of I starts at 0, and it ends at 10, each time increasing by 1. Again, that's each of the components here. Now, the reason it stops at 10 is that at some point, you will add one more to I, making it 11, and at that point 11 is not less than or equal to 10. Again, just to reiterate that this is not an error when the condition isn't met. This is just that when the condition is not met, you stop the loop. So the other thing we can do as exploring this one is that we can change the start point. So we're going to start at 5, we're going to end at 15. So you can see here we can change the range of numbers, but we still get 11 numbers here. Again, and in this case, I can prove it to you that 5 to 15 is not 10, it's 11 numbers. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, so we do get 11 numbers here. Now, one thing we haven't explored yet was this last one, which is the increment. How do we change the loop variable to go from the start to the end? So in this case, we're going to add 3 each time, and you're going to notice that it definitely decreases the amount of iterations. Now you might say, well, why would you want to do something like that? Well, that's going to come in the next example, where sometimes we can use that loop variable as part of our process, and our process might require for us to go through this series of numbers. Now, I want to just in case anybody's curious, why did we get the number 15 to display? Well, think about it. At some point, we went from 5, we added 3, got 8, we added 3, we got 11, we added 3, we got 14, we added 3, which means we go straight to 17. Now 17 is not less than or equal to 15, which means we don't go through that iteration. At that point, this middle condition failed. All right, so let's see what we can do with this loop variable. All right, so in this particular example, what we're looking at is that we've taken that value from the loop variable and simply squared it. So we can see here we're displaying the original value of I. So this is just the loop variable, just like we've seen in the previous example. And then we've squared that value and also displayed it. Again, kind of nice to be able to display the square of numbers. Now, again, if you're looking for something a little more practical, trust me, that's going to come based on the scenarios that you encounter. But definitely notice we can do mathematical operations with our loop variable. Now, continuing on with that concept of, we can use some of our previously learned programming concept that's part of our loop. Let's explore an example that uses the if statement. So before you actually run it, let's try to identify what's going to happen here. So for all values of I less than 5, we're going to display the word OK. Otherwise, we're going to display the word no. So let's see that in action. So we can see here for the values of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, again, this is the loop variable, the first number, we displayed the value OK because that's what the decision wants. Otherwise, we display the value of no. Now again, just like I said earlier, you might be looking at this thinking, okay, why would I want to do that? It's more the idea that you can use a decision inside of your for loop. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this in this video, but technically, you can have a for loop within a for loop. Again, a for loop will repeat any process that you know up to this point, and that you will learn as well. All right, so as part of our last example, I want to explore a specific type of process, which is called an accumulation. Now, in this first one, we're simply going to accumulate numerical data. So we can see here, we're going to use the plus equal shorthand operator to add the value of I to sum. So sum starts at 0. So as I increases, the value of sum is going to change. So again, you can see here that when the value of I is 1, the value of sum becomes 1. Why? Because we did 1 plus the previous value, which was 0, and became 1. So if you think of it almost like diagonally, here's the value of I, we're going to add it to sum, becomes 3. So 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 plus 5 is 15. Now again, you might be thinking, okay, when would I want to accumulate these numbers? The example is more to demonstrate that using this shorthand operator in conjunction with a for loop, we can accumulate information rather quickly. Now, let's go into the next example, which might feel a little more practical. So in this example, we're kind of doing the same thing, except that our variable is a string. So this is another common thing to do, especially in web programming, is to somehow accumulate string information, specifically HTML. So I was going to run the example. You'll see that for this example, I changed the starting point to 1, just so that you can kind of make the connection that at this point, the value of I is 1, which means we've added 1 asterisk. At this point, the second iteration of the loop, the value of I is 2, which means that by this point, we've accumulated two asterisks to our build. And we kind of keep going on. Again, instead of an asterisk, you can put HTML elements in here and then dynamically generate things to the web page. Again, that's going to be left as an exploration during your instructional and practical assignments. So this is a very short, let's go back to our presentation, overview of what a for loop is and what you can do with it. Again, in future videos, your mastery of what the process can be inside is going to increase, and then you really is going to start seeing the value of a for loop. So hopefully you're happy about being able to get the computer to repeat commands for you, and enjoy.